Typically, a conquered people will have an uneven contact and correspondingly be unevenly affected by the conquering power, as they are rarely homogeneous to begin with due to geography, climate and various other factors. In the case of the pre-Roman inhabitants of Britain, those inhabitants of the areas now referred to as the Celtic Fringe, had less contact with the Roman imperial conquest, and were correspondingly less affected by its cultural and economic practices and innovations. We still feel the effects of this today on the seemingly inherent differences and disparities between England and the Celtic countries of Wales, Ireland and Scotland. At first glance, Scotland may seem anomalous in this, as it has at times been more prosperous and innovative than England. However, there is an important cultural distinction between Highland and Lowland Scots, Lowland Scots being more or less culturally English with corresponding economic and educational developments. The rest of the Celtic people lacked the cultural backdrop that informed later culturally English institutions and economic practices. They were less linked to the continent, had less favorable agricultural conditions, and were more vulnerable to a breakdown of law and order. After the Germanic invasions, the Celtic peoples were again pushed to the fringes and reduced to being effectively vassal states of a more prosperous and outward-looking dominant England. The religious and monarchical disputes and revolutions that followed created within England a legal system renowned for its fairness and reliability, with the monarch lacking in absolute power to dissolve contractual arrangements, and a system of independent, impartial law courts, both of which were insisted upon by a rebellious nobility. Because of the stability these institutions created, this in turn engendered the investment and immigration of a skilled and entrepreneurial foreign class. For example, Lombard Street in London is so named because it was the base for so many Italian bankers. This in turn caused huge economic growth and prosperity relative to England's size. Being on the peripheries of this meant that Celtic peoples were less involved with this economic growth, and correspondingly benefited less. Because they lacked the incentive for advancement that economic opportunity provides, they therefore remained culturally and educationally backward. As industrialization began in earnest later on, Wales in particular started to benefit from it because of extensive deposits of raw materials like coal, tin, copper, iron ore and wool. It also had a pool of uneducated, cheap labor that could be put to work extracting these materials. Thus prosperity in Wales became dependent on servicing English and Scottish industrialization. When British preeminence in industrialization declined, so did demand for Welsh resources, as did investment in the country. Mines and mills were closed, and those jobs were never really replaced because an entrepreneurial class never existed in Wales beforehand that could have provided a new model for growth and prosperity. In response to this, the Welsh labour force became highly unionised, which only served to make its industry an even less attractive proposition for investment. In addition, its intellectual class focused on critical theory, sociology and social policy, rather than focusing on more economically advantageous fields of study. Wales's problems are not helped by at times foolish and short-sighted economic policy emanating from Westminster during periods of left-wing government, but on the whole investors, and taxpayers are involuntary investors in all but name, can hardly be blamed for not investing in a concern where there is little chance of a return. The one principle that the Welsh must adopt as they move into the post-Brexit era and campaign for more sovereignty is that which will make them a more attractive prospect for investment: entrepreneurship. There are plentiful examples that it can follow located in the Far East, South Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong and Macau, among others. Closer to home, the Czech Republic is a great success story to emulate. Blaming Westminster and the Tories will not solve their problems.